The Natural History Museum of the University of Zurich has had a dinosaur exhibit in the works for years, and they commissioned me to make an intro animation for it. There were a couple of constraints, time for one, and for two, I was doing an overseas move right in the middle. We discussed what I could do for them, and they were happy with a paper animation that I could transport in my suitcase, so big thank you. The brief goes like this. We want a playful take on this entry, with the little owl up here, which is actually on the facade, and to tease the exhibits inside. We'll follow the exhibit mascot Clara the magpie as she walks up to the museum and wakes up the little owl. She goes inside and becomes a gigantic magpie where she meets the other animals in the exhibit, and we get a chance to peek at everything that's going on. So, time to transform this into a proper background. Of course, the audio I supposedly recorded encountered technical difficulties, so instead we'll play that game where one person talks while the other uses their hands to look like they know what's going on, except they're both me. In a throwback to high school, I was struggling to remember how to use two-point perspective on a very tiny desk. And it's supposed to work where there's two vanishing points that look smaller because they're farther away from you, and the stuff in the middle it looks closer. And a ruler is usually enough to figure out where everything should go. But some things, like spacing windows, can get a little more complicated. I get there in the end, so let's just move out of Struggle Town. I used some carbon paper to make copies and traced them on nice paper. But I'm really not happy with the method because it left all these gray lines on my images, so I don't want to do this again. Let's find a new way to make copies. For the arch and the backdrop, let's try something else. This is my stop-motion animation software Dragon Frame. So, these pieces look right. I took a picture of the museum front and then used the onion skin feature that normally lets you see the previous frame when you're animating to make the image transparent. And now I can see what's happening in real time underneath. And this is kind of the same idea as a camera lucida, where you can reflect an image on a lens over your work and then trace it onto your work by looking through a lens. So that's really fun. Took a little time to get used to, but it was pretty simple in the end. I watercolor these and cut them out with a nice sharp blade. Maybe you can tell I was cold when I was doing this. This owl also needs to open its eyes, so I made them in series. After sketching some lovely Aldabra tortoises, I drew one from the side and worked out a mechanism for the back. I take a picture of it in Dragon Frame again, and turn on that good old onion skin, and I make my mechanical elements. Then I outline in permanent pen and erase all the pencil marks. Finally, some little watercolors. I'm real pleased with this mechanism. I think it turned out really sweet. Getting the magpie right was surprisingly hard. I did my sketches big and found another way to use that Dragon Frame by zooming out my images and flipping them. I'm really excited about the potential for using the software like this. The mechanisms in the magpie were more complex and tinier than the turtle, but like the turtle, it's all made of paper and tape. Then I also made a bigger version where I only animated the eyes. The giraffe was done in the same way, lots of thin layers of watercolor applied between letting it dry. While I duplicate lots of puppets like this, they're not all so easy. This Araucaria tree left me a puzzled monkey. I just went for my Jurassic example by making a billion of these little tufts and sticking them on. Not bad. These giant horsetails look just like I'd hoped. These horsetails weren't looking right though. The brief was to have them more like the European summer ones with these little spiky whorls. So I did a lot of prototyping with my Cricut to get something that looked okay and could actually be cut. I couldn't do this many of them so small by hand without wasting a lot of time and paper and probably cutting my fingers trying to hold them down. The last element that I have to make is for the intro scene. There's actually 3 moving parts here. We've got the magpie and the eyes, but I need to make the door. I put it off because brown paper was weirdly hard to source, and I needed a lot of it because I wanted a replacement sequence. It should open in just under a second, so I decided to use 18 out of 24 frames in a second. I roughly calculated the arc of the door opening in perspective and traced each door in Inkscape. I exported all the shapes to my Cricut and cut them from there. And I guess my Cricut got a workout for this animation. This way, when it's time to animate, I can just sit them in place. But the shapes aren't intuitive. They get wider and then shorter, and it was tricky to keep them all facing the right way, so I add a little dark line to the outside edge. It's a lot of work behind the scenes for an ultimately simple animation. The door's pretty plain because convincingly replicating rotating door details was a bit beyond me for this, plus last time I saw the museum door it was out for repairs. I hope they got that fixed. I finally finished up all the puppets, but the animation has to wait because I need to move to France. So goodbye Australia, and thanks for all the wallabies. Now, here's my new studio. So I put together my storyboard. This might have been helpful earlier, but better late than never. This is a great time for me to say thanks to my patrons for helping me get set up here. I used their donations to buy this camera arm and a polarizer for my camera and a few other goodies, so thank you so much. Now it's time to get animating. Here I've animated the elements separately and combined them together in Dragonframe. The intro went well. The transformation scene went well too. I wish I could say the same for the rest. But I'd made a monster and Resolve couldn't handle it without crashing, so I assembled the elements and built the parallax in 3 segments. I exported each one separately and then put them together in a completely different video project to be able to watch them. There's probably a better way to do this, but it took a lot of fiddling to figure out a workaround between program crashes, and this was over the course of 2 weeks. Let's see that animatic again before we jump into the final animation. Overall, I'm really happy with how this video turned out, and I think it has kind of a dreamy quality out of time and space where you see all of these animals across our history in the same place. I hope you enjoyed watching this, and a big thank you again to the University of Zurich for commissioning this project and giving me a chance to make something so fun. See you next time!